Hey, Shalom. I'd like to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. This is the brother Yakana from the GMS Houston camp, and this lesson is just going, or just based off of the elder Yasher Wamba's video he did yesterday. I think it was titled Every Idle Word. And in that video, it was based off a comment that somebody had left about him about the marriageable age and how they supposedly had looked into what the marriageable age was in ancient times, and they couldn't find any evidence. And they think that the marriageable age should be in your 20s. But, just based off of that, I went and looked up this, just a quick Google search, and it don't matter if you accept it or not. This is what the scriptures are referring to, and this is what it was before these times, before these modern times, before the Western ideas came in. This is an Eastern custom. We're not saying to go out and get young girls. We're just bringing out the fact that this is how things were done in ancient times. And a lot of people, it seems like, can't understand that. They can't wrap their mind around that. And that's fine. It ain't for you. So this is the Google question I asked. I said, I didn't mean to refresh it. I asked, Google, what age did people marry in ancient Levant? And that's, the area, the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, where Lebanon, Israel, the Middle East, what's called today. Where all them, matter of fact, let me just pull that up real quick. Give me 1 second. It's here. I just put in Levant. It says the Levant is the historical and geographical region along the eastern Mediterranean coast, roughly corresponding to modern-day Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, and parts of Turkey and Iraq. So you see the picture here. I'm going to try to pull that up. That whole area, that's Levant. If you didn't know, that's Mesopotamia. That's the Fertile Crescent. That's, this is what I'm referring to here. So from there, let's go back here. What age did people marry in ancient Levant? And it says in ancient Levant, the age of marriage varied by specific time, culture, e.g. Israelite, Canaanite, and social class, but generally girls married around puberty. And that should be the end of it. Puberty. When do you hit puberty? Maybe 12, 13, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later. Girls married around puberty, typically in their early to mid-teens. When is that? That doesn't sound like 20s. It's teens. While men married later, often in their late teens to early 20s or even later. It says general trends, the common age for girls to marry was around 12 to 15 years old, often shortly after the onset of menstruation, the flower of her age. In some legal traditions, the minimum age for marriage was set at 12 years and 1 day. Fathers typically arranged these marriages, and the girl's consent was not always a legal necessity. So the children, the boy or the girl, they didn't have to consent, because in the scriptures it tells you that the daughter is the property of the father. And then once that ownership, once the marriage is done, the marriage, that whole what the contract is finished, is now the property of the husband. He that getteth a wife getteth himself a possession. And then also there's other scriptures referring to that the daughter, or that the father, has power over the daughter. So like if she was to make a vow or anything like that, and the father or the husband heard it, and they're like, nah, you're not doing that, they have power over the daughter or the wife. So fathers typically arrange these marriages, and the girl's consent was not always a legal necessity, especially if she was a minor before reaching full maturity around age 12 and a half, which, men tended to marry later, usually in their late teens or 20s, and sometimes as late as age 30, as they needed to be financially established and able to support a family. And that's what in these times, doesn't that make sense that you see it happen, older men marrying younger women, but what do you normally see? The older men. They're not just bums, they're established men. They have houses, maybe multiple houses. They have businesses. They might even, already have children, whatever, but they're established. So when just saying, hey, I could have had, it ain't even talking about me. It ain't even worried about me. Because you could have had kids when you were a teenager and you would have been struggling like most people do. They had kids when they were a teenager and because they're not established, whatever. But just saying, the establishment of the man's having the responsibility. You're going to take care of a wife. You're going to take care of children. So you need to be established. That's just a way that's not really thought of in these times. It's thought of as evil, this or that, whatever. It says age gap. A significant age gap between spouses was common, with the husband typically being several years, sometimes a decade or more older than his wife. There's variations by group. Rabbinic Judaism, the later period, the ideal age for marriage was set at 18 for men, with an expectation that they should be married by the age 20. The minimum legal age remained 13 for boys and 12 for girls, but social ideals favored slightly older ages. So, social class, wealthier and upper class individuals sometimes married earlier than those in lower classes, as they could afford to do so, while poorer individuals might have to delay marriage until they were financially able to establish a household. Cultural influence, the influence of surrounding empires like Romans and Persians also brought different legal minimums. For example, the Roman law set the minimum at 12 for girls and 14 for boys, which could affect local practices. Remember, and those were two empires, 2 out of 4, or many empires that conquered over us. And they had a huge influence on us. The same way that America, this Western influence, has a huge influence over us. So they had a huge influence, is what I'm getting at. So keep in mind that the American way, this Western way of thinking, has a huge influence over you, and it can cloud your thinking of how ancient customs were. So, and I also, I clicked some of the links. Here it has like the link what to go to, and I can't remember. I think I went to that child marriage one. I went to marriageable age and the child marriage one, and I'm just going to get a few excerpts. It says marriageable age, this is from Wikipedia, is the minimum legal age of marriage. Age and other prerequisites to marriage vary between jurisdictions, but in the vast majority of jurisdictions, the marriageable age is as a right is set at the age of majority. Nevertheless, most jurisdictions allowed marriage at a younger age with parental or judicial approval, especially if the female is pregnant. Okay. Among most indigenous cultures, people marry at 15, the age of sexual maturity for both the male and female. In industrialized cultures, the age of marriage is commonly 18 years old, but there are variations, and the marriageable age should not be confused with the age of majority or the age of consent, though they may be. Anyway, just going down here in classical history and social attitudes. Classical antiquity In Greece, females married as young as 14 or 16. In Spartan marriages, females were around 18 and 25. In Rome, the Roman Empire, the Emperor Augustus introduced marriage legislation, which rewarded marriage and childbearing. The legislation also imposed penalties for both men and women who remained unmarried or who married but for whatever reason failed to have children. For men, it was between the ages of 25 and 60, and women between the ages of 20 and 50. And that's a Roman practice that was introduced. Women who were vestal virgins were selected between the ages of 10 and 13 to serve as priestess in the temple of God. Yeah, whatever. In Roman law, the age of marriage was 12 years old for females and 14 for males. And the age of betrothal was 7 years for both males and females. And that's not them getting married, but that's them. They're going to be married. They're going to get together. We're arranging this. That's like an engagement. Let's see here if it goes. Okay, it just talks about the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, nobody else got married. Let me see here. Mesopotamia. Oh, Mesoamerica. Okay, that wasn't really any kind of help. So this is child marriage. It says child marriage is a practice involving a marriage or domestic partnership, formal or informal, that includes an individual under 18 and an adult or another child. Yeah. So just going through the history. Yes, please. Where was it? Prior to the Industrial Revolution, women around the world were often married at an early age, usually soon after reaching puberty. And that should be the end of it. These practices carried over well into the 19th century in societies with largely rural populations. Men tended to marry later in societies and where a married couple was expected to establish a household of their own. This encouraged men to remain unmarried until they accumulated sufficient wealth to support a new home and marry adolescent girls. Adolescent means a teenager. So here, let me see. Huh. I know I was reading this. There it is. In many ancient and medieval societies, it was common for girls to be betrothed at or even before the age of puberty. So at puberty, before puberty, these things were arranged. According to Mordecai A. Friedman, arranging and contracting the marriage of a young girl were the undisputed prerogatives of her father in ancient Israel. Most girls were married before the age of 15, often at the start of puberty. So it has claimed that in the Middle Ages, marriage took place around puberty throughout the ish world. So look, this is what it is. We ain't got nothing to do with them small hats, but they taking our customs, which they're they're how do you say, they're Hebrews too, them small hats, the tiny tops. But this is our custom. This is an ancient custom. Like I said, ancient Israelite custom. So I went to the Blue Letter, and Salaki, it takes so long to get to the scriptures, but and you have to look these things up. You got to read, you got to do a lot of research, reading or whatever, but this is very simple to understand. And in the time coming, there's not going to be any kind of excuse for anything. When the Lord Yahweh returns, nobody's going to have any kind of excuse. So I looked up the word virgin in the Blue Letter Bible, and I like this. You go to here it starts you off with the primary words. It gives you all the words for virgin, but you go over here to the lexicon, and it'll give you, the different words, for, what's used for the word virgin. So just because you see the word virgin there, that is not always the same word in the Hebrew or the Greek. So from here, I looked up the two H1330 Batwala, and then also H5959 Alma or Alma. So both of those mean virgin, but there's two different, meanings to those. So here, I believe, let's see which one this is first. This is right, Alma, H5959, and the Strong's goes to the biblical usage. It says a virgin, young woman of marriageable age, maid or newly married. And then underneath here, it says additional information from the outline of biblical usage. And it says in quotes, there is no instance where it can be proved that Alma designates a young woman who is not a virgin. So this is a young woman that has not been touched by a man. This is a complete virgin, a young woman who has not been touched by a man, who has not been married. The fact of virginity is obvious in Genesis 24:43, which I'll get that, where Alma is used of one who was being sought as a bride for Isaac. And that verse is referring to Rebecca. So here, I'm going to keep going to this. Says here, the Strong's 5959 says it's a noun, feminine, a young woman, ripe sexually. What does that mean? She reached the flower of her age. She started her monthly cycle, her period. She started going through puberty. It says a young woman, either literally or of soprano no, that's not that. But here we'll keep going. We'll go to the Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. It says a girl of marriageable age. Let's see here. Used of a youthful spouse recently married. So youthful, she's young. The notion of unspotted virginity is not okay. It says, neither does it convey the idea of the unmarried state as has of late been maintained, but the nubile state and puberty. So young. That's a very, young. Let's see here. So here, the first verse that pops up, Genesis 24:43. Behold, I stand by the wall of water, and it shall come to pass when the virgin cometh forth to draw water, and I say to her, give me, I pray thee, a little water of thy pitcher to drink. And that virgin is, a young woman of marriageable age. She's young. He's looking for a young girl, and this is when the servant of Abraham was looking for a wife for his son Isaac. And I'm going to go to the next word, Bathwala. This is I didn't mean to refresh that, H1330. And it says a virgin, which means a young woman. Oh, you know what? That's not. Let me see here. Where is that? Man, where is this? It says a bride. It says to be separate. But a virgin is a young woman. Let me see here, because I'm. This is a virgin, pure and unspotted, so called as being separated and secluded from intercourse with men. Okay, God. So this is actually, what was that? The other one I was saying was a young woman, and this one is saying it's a young woman that hasn't been touched by a man. So this is a pure and unspotted, so called as being separated and secluded from intercourse with men. See the root of Arabic, a pure virgin, religious. And I'll go to that verse that it's referring to. This is Genesis 24:16. And the damsel was very fair to look upon. It's speaking of Rebecca, a virgin. She was very fair to look upon. The damsel. Let's look at that word for damsel. What is that? Na'ara. A girl from infancy to adolescence, a damsel. Let's see what this is. A girl, damsel, female servant. A girl, damsel, little girl of young woman, marriageable, young woman, a concubine. Okay. But that's what it's going into, what that word is going into. She's a young woman, a young girl. What can it be referred to? Very, and what is that? Virgin, Batwala. She was a virgin, Batwala. Neither had she been touched by any man or known by any man. So no man, not that any man knew her. Who is this girl? I don't know. No, but no man had known her intimately. She's a virgin. And she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. So just showing at the ages, you know, I thought I just, okay, there it is. Just showing there's a difference. In the ancient world, they were married young, and that's really about it. And this is all we're bringing out. Just in the ancient world, things are radically different than they are today. And we're not saying, to go out and get young girls and grape young girls, any of that. We're just bringing out what's in the scriptures. So, hey, Lord willing, this has been edifying. I'm going to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, great millstone, and peace and blessings to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. Shalom.